A very good evening to you. Welcome to KTN Prime. I'm Linda Gutu. Let's take a look at some of the top stories for you, including a very interesting one from Uganda. That is, if you're a man and you're hopeful of getting part of your dowry back. Date with justice. 3 Stepjoy students to be charged with murder. Once you pay it, it's gone. Uganda Supreme Court bans bride price refund after divorce.
We seek to support any bill that seeks to help attain the total gender rule.
Double the number of senators. MP's radical gender rule suggestion.
We, as agencies, we are comfortable working with Jordan.
And no more sending Kenyans to Jordan. Government ban shocks recruitment agencies. Thank you for joining us. Our sign language interpreter there at the bottom end of your screen is Meresha Oweti. Let's begin from the corridors of justice. 3 students from Stepjoy Boys High School will be charged with murder. Senior Principal Magistrate George Odwor ordered the 3 be presented at the High Court tomorrow for the commencement of the trial. The 3 are suspected to have had a hand in the arson attack at the school that left 3 of their schoolmates dead. Betty Kialo begins our coverage tonight.
The 3 students were arraigned at the Limuru court to answer to charges of murder. 8 others were released following lack of evidence linking them to the arson attack at the school on Sunday. The prosecution, led by Inspector Bernard Ngetich, had however pleaded with the court for a 3-day extension within which to carry out further investigations. He said that the medical report had not yet been provided and that samples from the crime scene had not yet been analyzed at the government's chemist. However, Senior Principal Magistrate George Odwor ordered that any request for an extension be made tomorrow at the High Court when the murder trial of the 3 will commence.
In view of the intended charges, let them be produced before the High Court at Nairobi, by latest tomorrow, 7th August 2015.
The 3 will be produced at the High Court Friday for the start of their murder trial. Families of the deceased are still coming to terms with the unfortunate incident that snuffed life out of their loved ones. The arson attack just adds to the incidents that have been experienced lately in schools around the country. Betty Kialo, KTN News.
Now to a story that will touch African men and women in a very personal and close way. The Supreme Court in Uganda has ruled that demanding bride price prior to customary marriage is perfectly legal, but not mandatory. Well, before men can start praising the ruling, however, listen to this. The same court has outlawed the refunding of bride price by the girl's family in case of a divorce. This ruling was given in a landmark judgment following a petition in which a civil society wanted payment of bride price to be declared illegal.
7 justices of the Supreme Court ruled that demanding for bride price by parents in customary marriages is constitutional and thus legal. The panel of justices included Chief Justice Bart Katurebe, his predecessor Benjamin Odoki, Christine Chitumba, John Wilson Sekoko, Dr. Esther Chisache Mayambala and Jotham Tumwesije. The appellant, Mifumi, a women's rights civil society in Tororo, had called for the banning of bride price, arguing that the act was unconstitutional and infringed on people's right to marriage. They also asked the court to ban the refund of bride price. 6 justices agreed with Justice Jotham Tumwesije's comprehensive findings that bride price does not obstruct a couple's consent to marry, as was stated by the appellant team, and that bride price is an old African tradition that has lasted for generations and cannot thus all of a sudden be referred to as a mere purchase of women.
The return of bride price was not that the woman in the marriage was on some sort of loan. But even in a sale, the cliche is that goods once sold cannot be returned, or goods once used cannot be returned. If that cannot be done in respect of common goods, etc., why should it be applied to a woman in a marriage?
In a minority ruling, however, Justice Esther Chisache Mayambala said that bride price should be declared voluntary and shouldn't be demanded by parents. Justice Chisache Mayambala said it is a constitutional obligation for parents or guardians to take care of their own children and should therefore not demand anyone to pay them back for the roles they played. She also argued that both the payment of bride price and refund of the same equally undermines the dignity of a woman. The 7 justices, however, unanimously agreed that refunding of bride price was unconstitutional because it undermines the dignity of women. The 6-1 ruling required that each party meets its own costs because the case was of public interest. City lawyer Ladislaus Lwakafuzi, the appellant's lawyer, acknowledged that it may take time for the community to appreciate the ruling. The ruling affects all cases in lower courts of law in which men are demanding a refund of bride price.
Now, the status quo is that you cannot demand back a refund of bride price.
Mifumi, the appellant, welcomed the ruling in a case that has taken almost 8 years to conclude. The next fight will be lobbying Parliament to pass the controversial marriage and divorce bill that has stayed on the shelves for decades.
This ruling and pronouncement will immensely aid the fight against women's and girls' abuses.
The landmark ruling has divided opinion on Kampala's streets. Story compiled by Namaja Irene, NBS Sunset.
The Big Q, in association with Thika School of Medical and Health Sciences.
So that story from Uganda is where we derive our big question tonight. We're asking, should Kenyans also refuse to give back bride price when customary marriage fails? The Supreme Court in Uganda has ruled that demanding bride price prior to customary marriage is perfectly legal but not mandatory. The same court has outlawed the refunding of bride price by the girl's family in case of a divorce. Let us know what you think. Tweet us at KTN Kenya. Tweet me at Lindo Gut. I'll be sampling some of your views. Some of them are already coming in. I'll sample them in a bit here on KTN Prime. Well, the clock is ticking towards the deadline for implementing two-thirds gender role principle, but lobby groups such as the Kenya Parliamentary Human Rights Association, however, remain hopeful that a solution can be found in time. As KTN's Timothy Otieno reports, the caucus is making radical proposals that include doubling the number of senators to bring in more women.
To bring a different
With just 3 weeks left to the August 27th deadline for implementing the two-thirds gender rule, lobby groups couldn't be any busier. The Green Amendment campaign, spearheaded by the Parliamentary Human Rights Caucus, is one such group. The group seeks to have 1 million signatures from Kenyans to support the implementation of the two-thirds rule. According to them, amendment through a popular vote will be more effective than a parliamentary amendment of Article 81B of the Constitution. If we let the parliamentary process proceed the way it has done, it might not realize the enactment of a law to realize the two-thirds gender principle.
Over the last 4 months, 2 bills have been introduced in Parliament to help avoid a constitutional crisis. The Chepkonga bill, presented by the chair of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, suggests that the rule be implemented progressively in a span of 5 years. But it's a bill that has faced opposition, especially from the women folk in Parliament. They say the bill seeks to jeopardize the time limit for the implementation.
We have 26 requests.
Another bill presented by the leader of majority in Parliament, Aden Duale, has also received a lukewarm reception on the floor of Parliament. The bill seeks to allow the creation of special seats for women in both houses. The male parliamentarians insisting that elective seats should be contested and not simply handed over.
We are not opposed to the Duale bill. Like my colleagues have said properly, is that we seek to support any bill that seeks to help attain the two-thirds gender rule. The only bill we oppose is one that wants to take away that right.
The campaign recognizes gender equality is a social issue that involves both men and women. It is therefore cannot be trivialized to be a woman issue. Cognizant of the need for equality in decision-making, the Green Amendment campaign takes all deliberate steps to ensure that men and women of all strides of life are involved in the campaign. Having got initial support from women, the Green campaign actively seeks to have more male faces to the gender campaign, since it is not a woman issue only.
The lobby has now come up with two formulas they say will salvage the situation. The first formula, which they call Formula 136, will seek for the increase of women's seats from 47 to 136 through twining of constituencies, such that counties with several constituencies can have multiple women representatives.
We appreciate that the Constitution did not create good mechanisms for purposes of realizing the Constitution, for realizing the two-thirds gender principle. You appreciate that Kenyans should have chosen an electoral process which should have been giving us straight ahead a method to realize the two-thirds gender principle. That is what we seek to do in the Green Amendment campaign, by creating specific women's seats to number the two-thirds that the Constitution anticipates.
The second formula, termed Formula 94, seeks to raise women representation in the Senate to 94, up from the current 16 nominees. It's an ambitious plan that may have come a little too late, but they remain adamant that despite the strained timeline, Kenyans deserve what is rightfully contained in the Constitution. With exactly 21 days left to the constitutional deadline for the implementation of the two-thirds gender rule, lobby groups such as the Kenya Parliamentarians Human Rights Association insist that if their two main suggestions are incorporated into the bills in Parliament, then a constitutional crisis can be avoided. Meanwhile, time is running out. Timothy Otieno, KTN News, Nairobi.
A Jordanian recruiting agency has told the National Assembly's Committee on Labour that the Jordanian government has been stopped from employing Kenyans. The agency has, however, denied allegations of mistreatment of Kenyan citizens in Jordan and asked the National Assembly to push the government to reconsider its decision. Fatma Pole has details of this story.
There has been a public outcry of mistreatment of Kenyans in Middle East countries, or even more heartbreaking stories of those who ended up coming back home in caskets after dying in mysterious cases. A situation that prompted the Kenyan government to issue a ban in October last year on the recruitment and sending of domestic workers to Jordan to stop the increasing cases in the Middle East country.
Fruitful discussion.
Today, officials of the Recruiting Agents Association of Jordan asked the National Assembly's Committee on Labour and Social Welfare to push the government to reconsider that decision.
If there is any case that you have in Jordan, please pass it to us, and we will approve that in our country there is no human violation. This is the only reason bring us. The only reason to make sure to the Kenyan people that our country, we don't have a violation, human rights violation in our country. We have a strong system. We like to keep our good relation between the two countries. You are most welcome to come there. It's your second country.
Before the committee, which was chaired by Matungu Member of Parliament David Were, the association's General Secretary Rami Asrawi argued that the number of cases of mistreatment reported was minimal and that it did not warrant a total ban on exportation of labor to Jordan.
Everything is negotiable. Everything. I mean, there is nobody from Labor Ministry of Kenya come to us and says, we want to increase the salary, and we say no. We didn't do that.
This sparking a heated reaction from members of parliament who argued that despite the ban being effected, cases of mistreatment are still being reported to death.
The withholding of travel documents by the employers is meant actually to facilitate them, not to allow these people to escape or to run away when they are being bashed and being frustrated by the families.
It's criminal.
Am I right?
I mean, at home, I keep my passport with my family, with my wife, and at the safe box. I don't carry my passport usually every day. So also I put them, my worker, the girl, she's working at my home with myself, my wife, my kid's passport, in the safe box, to not lose it. It doesn't mean I'm keeping her passport from her.
He's equipping women with the documents. He's saying that our passports are our wives. I think it is.
The chairperson of Kenya Private Employers and Recruiters, Hadija Asman, says the problem is not with Jordan. Instead, she faults the Kenyan government for not doing enough in the implementation of rules and regulations on recruitment of domestic workers to foreign countries.
What we need is an institution where we'll accommodate these ladies and have good time with them, to teach them from the basic languages, accepting a culture in a country. Because 2-3 days is not sufficient for an individual, somebody who's come up country who does not even know the culture of Nairobi, to go and be trained a culture of another country.
There is hundreds of thousands of dollars already here in Kenya. As long as they took the advantage to approve for us to do recruitment from Kenya, it is keeping our investments and the international reputation of Kenya to give us a list name of recruiting agencies to keep the workflow.
The Jordan government maintains that they are willing to strike a bilateral agreement that will see that Kenyan citizens are comfortable in Jordan. They say that as long as Kenya is ready to work with them, their doors remain open to all those seeking to earn a living in the Middle East country. Fatma Pole, KTN News.
Gatundu South Member of Parliament Moses Kuria, TNA nominated Senator Joy Gwendo and Nyeri Woman Representative Priscilla Nyokabi have been summoned by the TNA Disciplinary Committee. The 8-member committee unveiled today has also summoned other TNA members facing various disciplinary cases. All right, we'll have that story for you in just a minute, where Gatundu South Member of Parliament Moses Kuria, TNA nominated Senator Joy Gwendo and Nyeri Woman Representative Priscilla Nyokabi have been summoned by the TNA Disciplinary Committee. That story coming away in just a bit. Thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Let's now take you to that TNA Disciplinary Committee. And Gatundu South Member of Parliament Moses Kuria, TNA nominated Senator Joy Gwendo and Nyeri Woman Representative Priscilla Nyokabi have been summoned by the TNA Disciplinary Committee. The 8-member committee unveiled today has also summoned other TNA members facing various disciplinary charges.
Today is to unveil to you our disciplinary committee. They are now ready to commence their work, which is to effect discipline amongst the rank and file of the party, beginning from top to bottom. Under the TNA Constitution, nobody is above the laws of this land and the laws that govern political parties, and more particularly the Constitution of the National Alliance.
As per the disciplinary regulations, these matters must be heard and determined within 14 days of the notices of hearing being sent out. We have today summoned the following people to appear before us for a hearing of their cases as follows. The Honorable Moses Kuria will be heard on Wednesday, 12th August 2015, that is next week on Wednesday. The Honorable Senator Joy Gwendo will be heard on Thursday, 13th August in the morning. The Honorable Priscilla Nyokabi will be heard on the same day, Thursday, in the afternoon. The MCAs and the branch official will be heard the following week on Wednesday and Thursday.
Let's take you to the coast now, and curtains came down on the 11th edition of the Kenya Primary School Heads Association Conference that was happening in Mombasa. And as KTN's Francis Ontomo reports from Mombasa, despite promises by the government on various issues, the head teachers find themselves walking heads down from that conference.
At the Sheikh Zayed Children's Center, the Kenya Primary School Head Teachers Conference came to a screeching halt, a conference that will happen at a time when the country's education sector was facing a myriad of challenges. Several deliberations went underway, several promises were made, but the much-awaited discussion on the fate of their pay hike was pushed to the back burner.
My expectations have not been met here because we're expecting the TSC at least to behave well with us, at least to announce that our salaries are going to be increased.
For example, we were expecting the secretary of the TSC. She never turned up. The cabinet secretary never turned up. So from there we can see that we are just abandoned.
The conference may have ended without the Kenya National Examination Council giving direction on the exam registration that has left many parents, students and teachers in confusion.
We were expecting to know from our NEC, Kenya National Examination Council, there is some money that they were saying that we should be charged for any correction meant on the registration of children. We had registered children well online, but when we got the nominal rolls, we found that they had made some errors, and the corrections we were meant to pay 300 shillings per correction, of which it was not our mistake.
Some top government officials expected that the conference failed to show up, including Education Cabinet Secretary Professor Jacob Kaimenyi, and to some head teachers, this may have been a deliberate plan to avoid the meeting.
We are disappointed because it is like a father ignoring the children at home.
Let our expectations be met in terms of the money that the teacher needs. You know, it is all about money, and without money, we can't say we can't work. We will work because it is all about what comes from the heart and mind.
Among recommendations forged by the teachers was the push for the fast tracking of acquisition of title deeds for schools. Statistics by the National Land Commission indicate that at least 210 acres of land is occupied by government schools in Kenya.
We need those title deeds as early as yesterday to safeguard the public land. That is public property.
The curtains may have come down for the 11th edition of the Kenya Primary Schools Heads Association Conference here in Mombasa. But it's clear the nagging question of their pay hike is still a big bother. Francis Ontomwa, KTN News, Mombasa.
Let's stay with school matters, and the Kabarak University has launched 2 new schools at the university, the School of Medicine and Health Sciences and the School of Music and Performing Arts. Speaking during the official launch, the Chancellor of the university, former President Daniel Moi, said the schools will provide an opportunity to meet the increasing demand in the various fields, especially medicine. During the launch, university students presented a skit that mimicked the neglect patients are sometimes faced with in some hospitals. The first intake in both schools will be in September this year.
So you have did you do family planning or family planting? You go out, get out of here. Even you don't have a backbone.
As in all our program, our emphasis will always remain quality education founded on biblical Christian values. The School of Medicine and Health Sciences will provide an opportunity for students from Kenya and beyond our borders to pursue career in medicine and health sciences to meet the increasing demand for professionals in these fields.
Let's cross borders again. The number of Ugandans who want to replace President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni keeps on rising every passing day. The latest entrant is city businessman Joseph Elton Mabirizi, who this morning declared a presidential bid on an independent ticket. Here's more from our Ugandan partner station NBS.
City businessman Joseph Elton Mabirizi's presidential bid was occasioned by the desire to put right whatever has gone wrong over the past 52 years since the country's independence, especially during NRM's 29 years in power.
I am here to announce to the whole country my intention to contest for president coming 2016. We all know that this country has suffered over 50 years of mismanagement, including the 30 years of some kind of institutionalized corruption. Our country is not a poor country, but because of institutionalized corruption, it has failed, it has been stuck for decades.
Mabirizi Elton Joseph is a resident of Boya village in Kajansi along Entebbe Road. He went to Katwe Primary School for his primary level of education, Old Kampala Secondary School, and Mitiana St. John Secondary School for high school. He attended Mengo Technical Institute, where he attained a diploma. He has scores of certificates. He is a businessman and is married with 3 children. he intends to make fighting corruption a key point during his campaigns.
There is a lot of corruption in every government organization. So we need to deal with that.
Little-known Mabirizi, aged 40, also hopes to reduce the size of cabinet and constituencies to reduce public expenditure. He will use the generated funds to increase teachers' salaries. The presidential race has so far attracted candidates including NRM's Yoweri Museveni, FDC's Dr. Kizza Besigye and Major General Mugisha Muntu, Professor Vinicius Barya-Moreba, former Vice President Professor Gilbert Bukenya, Dr. Agri Chinji, an Australian-based cardiologist, and former NRM Secretary General Amama Mbabazi, among others. Report by Namutamba Esther for NBS Sunset.
Now, last Thursday, you may have watched a report by our special correspondent Alex Chamwada about differences and similarities between slums in Kenya and those in Nigeria. This came through the eyes of a Kenyan Catholic priest serving in Lagos slums. Tonight, we go deeper into how he is exactly helping fight poverty in the slums. And remember, this feature is courtesy of the Chamwada Reports, a weekly current affairs show that airs on KTN News every Thursday from 8 p.m.
Father Emmanuel Likoko, born and brought up in Kitale in Kenya, is a household name in Amukoko slums in Lagos City. He heads a Catholic parish that is in the middle of the slums. He has seen it all in Nigeria, as he had served in the northern part of the country that is home to the dreaded Boko Haram terror group before being transferred to Lagos City.
Our training is meant to prepare us for difficulties. You know, we are trained as missionary priests. And even in my training, I worked in the refugee camp in Uganda. Mentally, you have been prepared to some extent, but again, it boils down to the person. So, religiously, by training, we are prepared for it.
Father Emmanuel says, in the slums here, the girl child is vulnerable. Chances of making it in life are slim for them. And this was one of the key areas that needed attention.
This center is basically meant to empower our youth in the slums, and we target teenagers, especially teenage mothers. The Women Training Center is basically for teenage mothers and the girls who have just nobody to support them. It is highly subsidized, and some of them are here on full-time scholarship. The church pays for everything. Some are from very abusive and dysfunctional homes. Some girls are abused by their own relatives and they can't have a home for themselves. So we try to find a place where they can stay and then attend school here. And then when they finish, we try to help them get employment and have accommodation with their own so they can move on in life like that.
Coming to this school again really helped me in terms of training, because there are many people outside there that the way of living is not, especially this our area. But getting to this place, it really shaped me, makes me to know the good. One, I would say teenage pregnancy. And you see a girl at the age of 18, 16, 13, getting pregnant. Actually, this our area, common. But once anybody step on this, in this school, the person must surely change.
However, it does not mean that young men have been forgotten.
If you go to most of the big hotels around, you might find at least somebody who has passed through here.
Missionary work, he says, is not just about bringing Christ to the people, but also helping them live a better life among themselves.
At the end of it all, I intend going to a personal business of my own, or also getting other contracts outside too.
Maybe you can say, what you are doing here, can you still do the same in Kenya? And I will say that yes, I have learned a lot in Nigeria. And if you send me back to Kenya to work, I will not refuse. But I know that my style of working will really be very different than if I had just spent all my time in Kenya. And the little we are doing here, like getting the people out of the slums and setting them up somewhere else, trying to decongest the slums, I think the pastors in Kenya should do the same. We should not just be whining that, oh, the government is not doing anything and all that. But the slums are getting full and full of the people. We want our churches to be full of these same people, but I would prefer to have an empty church without and an empty slum than to have a full church with a slum full of people with problems.
You're watching KTN Prime.
Thank you for staying with KTN Prime. Let's take a look at business news. Not so very good news for Kenya, though. The Kenya shilling has today lost ground against the dollar, reversing a gaining streak witnessed in the last 3 days. The shilling closed the day at 101 shillings and 20 cents against the dollar, having weakened from 101 shillings and 1 cent yesterday. According to experts, the shilling is reacting to the decision by Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee to hold the base lending rate at 11.5% yesterday, amid high expectations that it would be hiked for the third time in 2 months. MPC's decision to hold the rates passed the market as a number of commercial banks had already sold dollars in anticipation for a rate hike. As a result, today's market activity was dominated by the lender buying back the dollar. The shilling hit an intraday low of 101 shillings and 40 cents on the ground of tight liquidity, even as overnight rates stay above 20%. The central bank plans to mop up 12 billion shillings from the market.
The element of loan repayments, both in the mortgage segment and the normal loan portfolio, these are the issues that actually made me believe they'll be able to maintain it. But as they've said, there's a serious risk of them going forward being able to increase the CBI rate.
We actually expected a hike of 100 bips, but so that's why we were rather surprised. I think the risk now is that they're going to have to backtrack and actually raise rates possibly in September or October, because a lot of the macroeconomics that are not underwhelming, there's a structural problem in that there's been a lot of capital outflows from the market.
Also portended about 100 BPS increment, largely because of possibly portended currency fluctuations. Relatively stable situations have been experienced in the market. I think that's why they decided to maintain it at 11.5.
Well, glimmers of hope are emerging in the tourism sector following reports that there is a marginal uptick in performance following the Global Entrepreneurship Summit, and our tourism players are getting ready to reap from this turnaround. KTN's Abia Gina tells us more on the developments in that sector.
We've had a tough 2 years, but I think a lot of positive things have happened in the last 2 years. There has been, the Kenya government has taken on a PR company, Grayling, to carry out some PR for the destination overseas. The Kenya Tourism Board launched Tembea Kenya, targeted at the domestic market.
The welcome news may just give Kenya that much needed lease of life into its distressed tourism sector. Players are upbeat about the sector with the peak season setting in.
This year, year on year, first 6 months of the year versus 2014, the decline in business has been a lot lower. So it just means that there's a lot more travel.
The sector, which accounts for over 12% of the country's gross domestic product, has been under severe pressure, with tourist numbers falling to all-time lows, mainly occasioned by multiple terror attacks and travel advisories issued against the country. But this is now changing. Data from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics shows that the total number of visitors arriving through Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and Moi International Airport increased from 53,275 in May to 63,085 in June, representing an 18% jump. Tourism being a primary foreign exchange earner, the low tourism inflows had worsened the weakening of the shilling, which is now trading at 101.20 against the US dollar. But the central bank governor is bullish as well of a stronger performance of the tourism sector as market fundamentals continue to hold.
It's true we haven't reversed we haven't had the travel advisories reversed. There's one that was reversed, there'll be others we hope will be reversed. But I guess the point is that notwithstanding, there is a lot of positive dynamism.
A rebound in the sector would not only boost earnings for investors, but it will as well uplift the lives of those who are part of the value chain that drives the sector. Abiagina, KTN Business.
The National Construction Authority has started drafting a policy blueprint that will establish a one-stop shop for pre-construction regulatory needs by proprietary developers, architects and surveyors. The move is expected to reduce the bureaucracy in the construction sector that forces stakeholders to have separate engagements with the National Environmental Management Authority, county governments and Ministry of Lands before starting construction, a fact that experts say is a key impediment towards growth of the sector. The Construction Authority will also work towards reducing fees charged by various authorities and regulatory bodies before and during property development in a bid to spur growth in the sector. According to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, construction is one of the fastest growing sectors in the economy that expanded by 11% in the first quarter of this year, buoyed by increased activity in real estate and infrastructure.
Authority, we're actually supposed to regulate the construction sector, and it is very true that there's been a bit of hue and cry that you need so many permits. You need an NEMA permit, you need the compliance certificate from the National Construction Authority, you need the approvals from the county governments. And so what we're working on trying to foster right now is a situation where you'd have a one-stop shop, where you have one center that you'd pay the fees for National Construction Authority, you'd do the NEMA, you do the county government, and then from there they can distribute the resources amongst the different entities. But that will help.
All right, in 2010, the central bank announced that banks would have to increase their core capital to 1 billion by the 1st of January 2015 in a move aimed at boosting banking stability. And this year, Treasury announced plans to increase this further to 5 billion by 2018. But the new central bank governor is throwing a spanner in the works. Adelaide Changole brings us the reasons why the governor is opposing the plans in this week's cause and effect.
In his budget speech on the 11th of June, Treasury Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich announced plans to increase bank core capital from the current 1 billion shillings to 5 billion in the next 3 years. Rotich argued that Kenya needed strong, well-capitalized financial institutions that are not only able to participate in the financing of large projects envisioned in the Vision 2030 Master Plan, but can also withstand financial shocks and crises. The decision would force some consolidation of banks in the market, given that 50% of the country's 44 banks have a core capitalization of between 1 billion and 4.6 billion shillings. And incidentally, bankers do not appear averse to these ambitions and in fact urge the government to scale the requirements up even further.
We have too many small banks running small balance sheets, which are not big enough to actually make a meaningful big lending that we need for big infrastructure that we're doing.
Not only can't you not finance big projects, but also, relatively speaking, the cost of operating those banks is higher. The cost of doing financial services, providing financial services will be higher. So it creates scale, it creates banks that can take on big projects and overall a positive impact on the economy.
But the plan is now receiving opposition from the unlikeliest of sources, the Central Bank of Kenya, the regulator of banks in the country. Speaking before National Assembly's Finance Committee today, CBK Governor Dr. Patrick Njoroge said the move would increase dominance in the banking sector, which could be detrimental to the economy, reduce competition, and hurt consumers in the process.
Small banks may have niches that, as you mentioned, that are being served by them. Once they are consolidated into a bigger bank, the bigger bank may not be interested.
Moreover, he said the proposal neglects aspects like liquidity and how much leverage a bank can handle, which are also crucial to the continued growth and development of the banking sector. In his presentation, Dr. Njoroge proposed that banks' core capital be matched to risk as opposed to the current stance of issuing blanket amounts on all banks.
whether you need to be a bank if you're servicing microfinance and small to medium-sized businesses, or whether you can be a financial institution as exists in other countries, is probably what we need to think about.
But Treasury has defended its stance, saying increasing the capital requirement would actually increase competition. While consolidation will reduce the number of banks in total, it will increase the number of big banks in the country, each with more power to lend, and this will lead to lower lending rates in the long term.
The 5 of the big banks probably constitute or maybe 2/3 of the assets and liabilities of the banking sector, and so you're not having that much competition. But once you now have this consolidation with bigger banks, then you'll find that the ownership will be a bit reduced, and therefore you will expect more competition, and therefore more efficiency and lower rates.
Moreover, Treasury says the banks that do not want to consolidate can transform into microfinance lenders so that there is continued diversity in the market.
We have opened the window of microfinance, which are for banks which target SMEs, and we think that nobody will be left out. That banks consolidated be able also to increase their capacity to lend to the economy.
CDK, however, called on Treasury to hold off implementing the proposals to allow further consultation with stakeholders. Adelaide Changole for Cause and Effect.
Right, let's wrap this up by looking at today's sports news. Mobile service provider Safaricom has announced it's resuming talks with the Kenya Rugby Union with hopes of a conducive agreement that will see them extend its sponsorship to the union. Safaricom has, however, continued to pile pressure on KRU chairman Richard Omwela to continue cleaning up the union and more so find a way of dealing with directors who have been named in various funds mismanagement schemes.
This year, we made a very difficult decision, which was to pull out of rugby sponsorship.
The sponsorship termination by mobile service provider Safaricom was prompted by funds mismanagement by the Kenya Rugby Union as well as wrangles that hit the union going into the elections. After the election of Richard Omwela back to the union as chairman, his first assignment was to restore sponsors' confidence, and although it has not been an easy ride, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Safaricom on Thursday morning disclosed that it has resumed talks with the union about a possible comeback to the sport, but their conditions.
We are not going to commit any sponsorship money unless we can be fully satisfied that all of the outstanding issues have been resolved. All of the people who have been named in reports do what I think our good president says, steps aside.
Thursday's development throws the ball back to the Kenya Rugby Union chairman to continue steering reforms in the board before sponsors' confidence is fully restored.
One of the things we've done is bring Ron on board as the CEO of the union, and Fred here, who was introduced as the CFO of the union, to look after our funds.
The National 7th Circuit has already kicked off without a sponsor while time is running out for the annual Safari 7th tournament that was pushed to October. The push to have board directors implicated in funds mismanagement step aside does not seem like one that will end soon.
I really want you back, Bob. And Dias, I really want you back because without you guys, this game is going nowhere. So if they tell me they're not coming back, I think I say, okay, so what am I doing here? I might as well just pack my bags and go home.
Meanwhile, despite expressing their commitment, national carrier Kenya Airways are yet to renew their National 7th team sponsorship that came to an end last month.
we are reviewing and looking at continuing sponsoring the Sevens team. But first, as Bob has said, we request the chairman to look at the issues that we have raised. We have written several letters to him.
The national sevens team players' contracts with the union have also ended, but focus remain qualification for the Rio 2016 Olympics. Lynn Washira, KTN.
Kenya Premier League today received a shot in the arm after sports betting company SportsPesa signed a 4.5-year contract with KPL. The deal, which will run until 2019, will see the top-tier league renamed SportsPesa Premier League, with the league winners pocketing more than the current 4 million prize money.
After a 3-year partnership with East African breweries that saw the brewers pump 170 million Kenya shillings to the Premier League in 2012 to assume title sponsorship status of the league, the top-tier football league in the country has now adopted a new title sponsor after EABL sponsorship ended in June this year. Kenya Premier League Limited signed a 4.5-year sponsorship deal of undisclosed value with sports betting company SportsPesa.
Udhamini wa SportsPesa umeshinda ule wa Tusker. Kwa ule Tusker walikuwa wanatupatia milioni 170 na hawa wanakuja na zaidi ya hiyo. Kwa hivyo hii ni kuonyesha kwamba vilabu zitaweza pata fedha zaidi kuanzia msimu ujao, na hiyo itaenda mpaka wachezaji, marefa, makocha, kuweza kuimarisha kandanda yetu. Na itaweza saidia pia kujumuisha timu kuu ya taifa. Kwa vile tunataka kuona kwamba timu kuu pia iweze kushiriki kwenye vikombe barani Afrika na pia ya World Cup.
The partnership between KPL and SportsPesa will go a long way towards meeting this objective. We have a dream that one day the Kenyan Premier League will be the best league not only in Africa but beyond.
With the Premier League already past the mid-season, the winners of this year's title are set to bag the usual prize money of 4 million shillings, with the amount set to go higher next season.
Society believes in a bright future of football in Kenya. We are fully persuaded that with proper support, Kenyans will soon have a reason to celebrate their players on the world stage.
SportsPesa, which has been involved in a majority of sporting activities in the country, reiterated its commitment in ensuring Kenya qualifies for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar.
So a good number of you are already making fun of me on Twitter for saying SportsPesa. I'm Luo, come on guys. Okay. Kite surfing is taking shape in the country. More youths in the coast are taking up this sport as a way of generating an extra coin, as well as keeping off the drug menace in the region that has ravaged most youth. However, just like any other developing sport, it has its challenges, and the youths hope the coastal counties will invest more into the sport.
Kite surfing is gaining traction in Kenya. From afar, it looks an easy sport to navigate through. However, it takes a lot before one becomes a pro in the sport.
Always.
German surfer Nikolai has been kite surfing for a long time and is now recruiting Kenyans into the sport. He believes the environment is conducive and the sport could be used to market the coast to attractive beaches.
It was really fascinating, the speed which the kite surfers went across the bay, and I said, let's give it a try.
The locals are taking into the sports to run away from drugs that have affected most coastal youths. The sport has its own challenges. Lack of enough equipment means locals have to surf in shifts, and they hope the county government can use the sport more to market the coastal counties as tourist destination areas.
Equipment kupata mpaka Europe, alafu sasa inakuwa ngumu sana, pesa mpaka alafu ile bika kidogo. Sasa lakini hatu kufa moyo, bado tunaendelea tu.
KTN Weather, in association with More Team Do. Q, in association with Thika School of Medical and Health Sciences.
So the Supreme Court in Uganda has ruled that demanding bride price prior to customary marriage is perfectly legal but not mandatory. The same court has outlawed the refunding of bride price by the girl's family in case of a divorce. And that's why, on our big question tonight, we asked you, should Kenyans also refuse to give back bride price when customary marriage fails? Lots of feedback, a number of them quite hilarious. Sharon Chilumo says, Kiendacho kwa mganga akirudi. I don't think such a thing should happen here in Kenya. Estienne Koech says, without taking sides, the whole thing of bride price shouldn't be there. Let's fight it to save our women from sale. Karen Miriam says, no, Linda, most Kenyans are polygamous. Return of a paid dowry enables payment of the next dowry in the next marriage. Like, seriously? Okay, Polycarp Sakwa says, no, Kenyans should not borrow that culture because it will encourage women to take marriage for granted. Victor Anzel says, when business goes sour, everyone parts with the share they contributed. You don't leave them. Jen Clow says, bride price should not be refunded because it covers for the hardships women go through prior to divorce. And finally, Kavesh says, if divorce is granted on dysfunctional relationships, then pursuit of refund is legitimate if cause is established. Those are some of your opinions on our big question, whether or not Kenyans should also refuse to give back bride price when customary marriage fails.
Enroll with us today in any of our branches countrywide. Thika School of Medical and Health Sciences, nurturing professional excellence.
And that is where we leave it on KTN Prime. Thank you so much for your company. I'll leave you in the good hands of Betty Kialo tomorrow, Friday briefing. Have a good night. I'm Linda for good.